දැන් මේ සාකච්ඡාව බලනකොට ඔයගලන්ට සිංහල උපසිරසි සබ්ටයිටල්ස් ඔන් කරගන්නවා නම් කරන්න තියෙන්නේ YouTube වෙබ් එකට ගිහිල්ලා වෙබ් එකේ තියෙන settings icon එකට ක්ලික් කරන්න. ක්ලික් කරලා එතනින් auto translate ගිහලා එතනින් සිංහල තෝරන්න. මේක මොබයිල් එකේ නැහැ, YouTube වෙබ් එකේ විතරයි තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් මෙතනින් හැර මේ සාකච්ඡාව බලනවා නම් ඔයගලන්ට subtitles on කරගන්න වෙයි. Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast Knowledge Hub with Sanjay Alitogether. I am here today to discuss the Middle East situation with our resident war specialist and a strategist, Mr. Nilanthan Niruthan. Hi Nilanthan, after some time.
Hi, yeah, it's good to see you. Great to be here in the studio, so thank you for having me.
Yes, great. So you came directly from a lecture here, right?
Yes.
Right, cool. What was the lecture about, may I ask?
The lecture was actually about this.
Okay, about the war situation.
And the path to victory for both sides. So basically, what both sides are hoping will happen for them to win this conflict.
But there are more than one side in this, right?
Yeah, there's more than one side in this, but in general, you could call it the US-Israeli-Arab alliance largely on one side and Tehran on the other side. So largely the two primary belligerent factions.
Okay, let's take it step by step.
Yeah.
So yesterday I did a podcast with two Iranian students. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw it. Yes.
What do you think generally about it?
See, first of all, I think you should be commended for giving space to voices like that, because it's very difficult for those voices to get a lot of space, particularly in like what we would call the global south, where right now the sentiment is very much anti-Israel, anti-US, so you can't really showcase some of these things, because then people would say, aha, so what agenda are you working for? I thought it was interesting in that sense. Look, the Iranian diaspora is kind of like the Sri Lankan diaspora, where we've got to remember that their narrative alone is not the full picture, right? So now the major problem that Iran is currently facing is that on the one hand, you have a system that's very resilient. The Americans and the Israelis and the Arabs might not fully appreciate how resilient the Iranian system is. But at the same time, because of Iran's actions, it doesn't look like the other side can afford to withdraw unless some serious permanent damage is done to the present regime. So on the one hand, their regime is built to withstand this kind of resilience. They've been preparing for this for the last 50 years almost. On the other hand, the cost that they will have to pay is also very, very high at this point.
So since we are taking it step by step, so let's first focus on what was the most latest incident that kind of triggered this war? See,
nothing really triggered this as a sole incident.
People say it's Epstein files.
Okay, so that's interesting, right? Now Netanyahu's primary political opponent in Israel is implicated far more deeply in the Epstein files than he is. Right? So once again, the day that they launched strikes against Iran was on the United States' side, when Bill Clinton's Epstein hearings were supposed to be the major media showcase of the day. So while, some people say, look, this is to distract from the Epstein files. Some people say, look, this is the Jewish lobby in Washington. Some people say it's the Sunni Arab countries trying to wipe out the Shia Persian interests. Some people say this is all about oil, this is all about dollar. So there are elements of truth to all of these things. And in order for us to understand why this happens, there's a larger trend, macro trend we need to understand, which is what's happening with the dollar at the moment and what's happening with energy at the moment, right? So now with energy, there's an invisible war going on right now, which I don't see many analysts covering. And so there's the petro-state versus electro-state war, where the United States is leading the charge for a resurgence of global fossil fuel usage, because they are now the largest provider of oil and gas. You have them on one side, and you have China, which is now, it has a monopoly on the renewable energy market because of its monopoly on refining rare earth, critical minerals. They've electrified the country to a much bigger extent than most other countries are, and they're spending lots on subsidies in terms of exporting this renewable technology. So Donald Trump wants you to buy as much fossil fuels as possible. Xi Jinping wants you to electrify as much as possible. And every major geopolitical war that we've seen over the last 1 year is a direct result of this. Look at Venezuela, for instance. Now, even though once again with Venezuela there are
Actually,
many...
nobody has
Go on.
talked about what you're talking about.
Yeah, nobody talks about this kind of stuff. This is proper hardcore macro strategic stuff. We have lots of experts in this country, but the problem is that none of their livelihoods are dependent on them making accurate predictions like mine is. So they can just say whatever they want. They can recant it later. You can have a blog. You can have a Substack. You can have a YouTube channel.
Later on.
You can connect the dots later on. You can pretend like you were right all along. There are lots of luxuries
You can
that...
draw a logical argument from whatever you've been telling, even if it's not incorrect. Even if it's not correct, you can actually draw a logical argument to support your cause, at least in a bit, and that bit will be the much larger presentation of theirs.
Exactly. I mean, I always make the analogy. So a lot of people sing in the shower and some people sing for a living. But most of these people who sing in the shower are convinced that they can sing as well as the ones who are paid money to sing, right? So I am someone whose livelihood depends on accurate analysis, which is why you won't hear stuff like this from the general academic or intellectual class that we have here, because most of it is just talk without any analytical, framework to it. Anyway,
What is your livelihood, may I ask, by the way?
so
You can do some self-promotion.
yeah. So I run. Thank you. So I run a think tank and consultancy called the Center for Law and Security Studies. So we work with both the public sector and the private sector. So essentially in explaining what's going on around the world, explaining the major trends that we see. So for example, I'm a lecturer at the National Defence College, which is the highest seat of military and strategic learning in Sri Lanka. So senior members of the Air Force, Army, Navy, and the police. I also am a visiting lecturer at the Buttala Army War College, at the Bandaranaike Diplomatic Training Institute. So, and my think tank also works with private organizations on facilitating discussions and providing analysis.
Okay.
So the point is, I explain how the world works to people and hope that it's analysis that they can't really get simply by reading Bloomberg or whatever, which is how most experts work. Anyway, so there's the petrostate versus electrostate dynamic going on. If we look at Venezuela, for instance, now what was Venezuela about? Venezuela was about bringing all of those energy reserves into one strategic umbrella where Washington can decide whom the Venezuelans sell to and what currency they use. And even Iran, of course, while there are many reasons, there's the Israeli argument, there's the Arab argument, there's the Persian argument, blah, blah, blah. We can get into those one by one, but we can't ignore the energy factor either. Iran has one of the largest oil and gas reserves in the entire world. If you can get that under the same strategic umbrella as the Gulf countries, as the United States, as Canada, this now unlocks a new golden age for oil and gas. And if you can get it all to be sold in dollars, then from Washington's perspective, it's also a new golden age in American prosperity. So Venezuela, Iran, this is all about consolidating the fossil fuel industry, because on the other side is the Chinese electro giant. So this is all actually on the macro scale. It's actually about countering China on a big global energy competition.
But we were told that someday, sooner rather than later, the fossil fuels will end, right? So there's a limit to the usage of it. So now you're saying that it's a golden age again.
See, now imagine, right now the International Energy Association, all of these supposed energy experts, for 15 years they kept saying gold's going to die out, oil's going to die out, and energy transition's coming, you're going to run out of oil, and energy transition is coming, and energy transition is coming. Where is the energy transition? We still use overall as much fossil fuels today as we did in 1995. Despite billions, if not trillions, being spent on raising awareness on the importance of renewable energy, on the importance of saving the planet, the economics of renewable energy work out for one purpose, which is electrification. If you want to run these lights, these computers, blah, 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 on a solar panel or renewable energy, that is very feasible. Unfortunately, only about 20% of the world's energy demand is electric. So every single...
Isn't that growing?
It's growing, but it's growing at such a small percentage that the growth is not even registering on a scale. So if you look at the 4 major industries in the world, fertilizer, steel, concrete, plastic, these 4 together guzzle up more energy than almost every other industry combined.
What about AI and data centers?
So I'm just coming to that. So these 4 right now guzzle up more, and they all use fossil fuels because the economics of renewables is not feasible for them. Now with AI, this is now becoming a major battlefield for this fossil fuel versus electricity dynamic, because China wants the data centers to be run on renewable energy, because you can create electricity from that efficiently. And the United States wants natural gas, particularly LNG, liquefied natural gas, to be the big provider of energy for data centers. Look, eventually, unless we actually get to data centers being the primary mode of economics, we're not going to know the answer. So right now, many AI data centers feel that they need natural gas to function. Some, like the one that's opened up in Malaysia, India is opening up one as well. Those will be run on wind and solar energy and things like that. And we'll see how feasible the economics, because it all just comes down to basic cost and benefit, right? You can tell people that the world will end if they don't use a solar panel, but unless it makes financial sense for them personally, nobody is going to buy a solar panel. So on the AI thing, the jury is still out on which is better.
Okay. So you are saying that world has now divided into 2 camps. One is America based, and one is Chinese.
Yeah, petro-state versus
petro-state.
electro-state.
So electro-state is only one country?
Yeah, China is the first electro-state, but China's aim is to make as many countries as possible electro-states. See, this is the new Cold War. Just like how in the Cold War, the Americans raced to make everybody capitalists and the Soviets raced to make everybody communist. Here now we're going to start seeing a race. We're already seeing this happen, where the United States is in a race to get as many countries as possible back to fossil fuels. And China is in a race to convince them, saying, oh, no, you need to go the renewable route, because China is going to be the clear winner if that renewable energy transition happens, because China has that entire industry in a chokehold because of critical minerals and things like that.
So China has critical minerals in the country, inside the country?
As in China has a monopoly over refining the critical minerals. See, okay, very good question. This is an important point, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, renewable energy, it's great for the earth, it's lovely for the planet. There are certain critical minerals that need to be used to build these wind turbines and solar panels and all that. And refining it is a very, very environmentally damaging process. China has a monopoly, almost like 90% of the world's critical mineral refining. As it comes in the raw form, you then refine it into something that can be used in a manufacturing chain. That process happens in China at great environmental cost. So the wind turbine and the solar panel that you think is saving the world, the process required to create that is devastating for the environment, which is why Europe will never be able to catch up to China's critical mineral refining monopoly.
Because of the regulations?
Because of the regulations, because you need to be ready to destroy your own environment on a large scale in order to break China's near monopoly on this. So it doesn't matter where the critical minerals are. The question is, who has the technology, the know-how, and the political will, the environmental will to actually absorb that damage. And China currently is the only country that's willing to do that. That's planned this well ahead and who've been working on this for about 30 years at this point.
Okay. What about the electric car batteries?
So electric car batteries, once again, China has a massive stake there. There are other electric car battery players as well. But as long as you're using an electric battery, it's good for China. Doesn't matter where it comes from, because China is going to be a part of that supply chain in some way. China is going to be dominating that market in some way. So for the United States, it's good if you use petrol and diesel and all that. For China, it's good if you go down the electrification route.
So the whole Iran fiasco is part of a consolidation effort by the West, the petrostate.
Absolutely. Of course, we can go into the regional factors as well, and the regional factor. So there's a regional chess game happening, and there's an international, a global chess game happening.
Let's go for the regional one first.
Okay, so let's go with the regional one. So now regionally, as you know, the Sunni Shia division, some people say, oh, it's not a very big division, you pay too much attention to it.
Just a factual correction there. I mean, not yours. On the other podcast, when I talked to them, Wikipedia says it's about 95 to 99% Islamic country. But when considering what they have said, what they are saying is that on the ground it's not the case. It's only about 20% of the people are actually Islamic. All the others are either atheist or Zoroastrians and some other religions. What do you think of that state?
No, so look, the thing is, in rural Iran, deep conviction in Islam has always been a thing. In fact, often people show pictures of Tehran from the 50s and 60s of women in mini skirts and all that, right? While that was true, that was very much urban Iran. If you look at pictures from rural Iran, you will see that that religious hold was still very much there. Of course, there is a Zoroastrian community. The Indians call them the Parsi community. The Parsis who came, they are Zoroastrians. So essentially, Iran is a deeply religious country. Maybe the urban population, the city-based population, and the diaspora, maybe they have a different reading. But if you look at the political structure of Iran, the way that these political structures over the last 50 years have translated into social structures, the way that many people with a lot of money, including the Americans, have tried to secularize this structure through internal revolt somehow, and they've still not been able to do it. All of that should tell us that Iran is a very deeply religious society.
But what if whoever's protesting against the government is getting killed as soon as they raise their voice? And according to them, the army that killed the citizens of Iran were recruited from other countries, nearby countries, through the regime, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, none of us, even if it happened here, most people would not put out their voice against the government in that case.
Yeah, but that doesn't determine whether you're Buddhist or not. See, that's you responding to a government tyranny. Right, so I'm not denying that there are many people responding to the heavy-handed way, and people focus on what happened the last few months, but you've got to remember that over the last 6 or 7 years, periodically there have been these massive protests which the Iranian government has put down with force. In some cases, 20,000, 30,000 people being arrested or killed within the space of a month, just like that. So they have been extremely brutal with their suppression.
So the government is not popular among the people?
The government is not popular among the people if you were to just take local factors. But now when you bring in an external factor, the risk is that everybody now consolidates against an external enemy.
But the US expects that the people will rise up against the government because of the targeted attacks and the removal of the hierarchy of the government.
So that's basically what it's going to come down to. The Iranian government is hoping that the people will not buckle. The United States and Israel are hoping that the people will buckle, as in they are hoping that there will be some kind of spontaneous people's revolution, which can now be possible because of the air power and firepower they are providing. While the Iranian government's hope is that something like that will not happen, and that they are too much of a resilient society which has been preparing for an eventuality.
What would you count on?
This. See, the thing is, right now it's playing out exactly as both sides predicted. As in, the Americans have been able to destroy a lot of the superior infrastructure, as in the bigger infrastructure of the Iranians by kind of, Iranian standards. But at the same time, the Iranians have been able to hassle US allies and US bases with these drones. And even if you send 1,000 and 995 of them get intercepted, 5 of them going through, still presents a major problem for the entire region, right? So I do hope that some kind of regime change in Iran happens, because that is the only way to end this without World War III.
Oh, is that so?
Look, if the Americans don't succeed here, if the Iranian strategy of tanking the American economy by attacking the Gulf states, if that plays out, if this turns into a war of attrition that lasts for 1 year or 2 years, like the Russia-Ukraine war did, that will inevitably lead to a third world war.
So if it lasts for more than 3 weeks, we are cooked.
Oh yeah, I mean, so we are in the first line of, the casualty list or whatever. We are right on top of that list, right? So thankfully, if you remember, a lot of experts predicted that the price of crude oil was going to go above $100 and all that. Thankfully, when it opened on Monday, it's not crossed 81, 82, and it's kind of stayed on the 78, 79 range. But if this keeps getting prolonged, then there's a huge chance that oil prices will spike. And if that happens, like you said, we're cooked. I can think of far more colorful words to describe our situation if that happens. Mm-hmm. But this is a result of 75 years of us not really having a coherent foreign policy with continuity, a coherent energy policy, a coherent defense policy that can be transferred from one regime to another. We don't have that. As we've discussed many times, our foreign policy history is, I become the president, we become pro-India, then you become the president, we become pro-China, someone else becomes president, we become pro-USA, and we essentially play merry-go-round with our foreign policy. So this is the result of all of that kind of chaos.
So can America balance out the world's oil supply with whatever the reserves that they're having, or are they producing new oil?
They're still producing and pumping out oil. You're not going to be able to replace it that quickly, because there's also a supply chain issue. So just because the Americans, for instance, were able to replace Europe's need for oil when Russia pulled out. If you remember, when the 2022 war happened, 2023 and 2022 was very hard for the Europeans. The winter was very, very hard. But by 2024, they were fine, because the United States was now like, hey guys, all our natural gas stuff is set. We are now going to be the largest oil and gas exporter in the world. All these days of us buying oil from these Middle Eastern countries and all that is over.
Is it?
Now we sell.
Really?
Yeah, so the shale revolution, which happened about 15 years ago, is the primary reason why the United States has gone from being a net importer of oil to now being the largest. I mean, they import more natural oil and gas today than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. Mm-hmm. America is the petrostate, fossil fuel, oil and gas giant, juggernaut, whatever you want to call it, of the world.
And also they now export.
They now export all over the world. So Europe is now almost completely dependent on American natural gas.
So where do they have these deposits? Oil deposits?
So there are many, many places. There's the Alaskan Basin. There's the Permian Basin. There are a couple of some of these, even one of these basins reportedly has more oil and gas than the whole of Saudi Arabia put together. So this is where the whole drill baby drill slogan comes from. You might have heard of it.
Yeah.
The Trump campaign, one of the big things was drill baby drill, because for a long time, drilling was not allowed because of environmental regulations. And Trump, essentially, the first day that he took over in office, he immediately signed an executive order saying this is an energy emergency. We are now going to unlock American energy potential, and we're just going to start drilling. And so much progress has been made even since then.
So ultimately Trump knows what he's talking about?
Yeah, look, I mean, the thing is, people who think Trump is clueless are often either academics or people who like to have very confrontational conversations about politics. But none of them are actual paid professionals. All the paid professionals that I know analyze this in a very sober, clinical, scientific way. We are not here to tell you that Trump is an idiot, or that Putin is an idiot, or that Xi Jinping is an idiot. We believe that countries follow very, very clear strategic lines. There's a global chess game going on for currency, for energy, for commodities, and all of these countries are a part of that game. So we have lots of people who aren't even aware of these big trends that are happening, right? So once again, like I said, it's the difference between somebody who sings in the shower and a paid singer.
But the Trump is fighting against his own Supreme Court.
So so okay, that's a good example, right, of how we just chase headlines. Now, anybody who actually reads that news story will see that the Supreme Court very clearly said, find another bureaucratic channel to push these tariffs. Not this bureaucratic channel. That's all the Supreme Court said.
Not the tariffs.
No. But look at the media discourse. This is, once again, right, just all kinds of self-appointed experts just chiming in. Oh, the Supreme Court has now put a check on Trump. Oh, all these countries that thought they would have to deal with tariffs no longer have to deal with tariffs, blah, blah, blah. People were acting as if the Supreme Court just shut out Trump's tariff plan. But that's not the case at all. The tariffs are going to be back, and they're going to be back in an even bigger way. The Supreme Court just said, do not use this channel for it, use this channel for it. So now they have to go back and use that channel.
So can you tell me what's happening with the regional politics surrounding Iran, and how the other countries, other Gulf nations, they got together against Iran and they kind of signed? Is it just a news, or have they signed some sort of an agreement?
See, but the thing is, even if they signed an agreement, I wouldn't give it a second look. Imagine, do you remember a few months ago, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed a defense agreement, and everybody was like, oh wow, this is a new era in cooperation. Oh wow, this is a check to the Indians. This is a check to the Americans. This is going to reshape the Middle Eastern world order. Since then, Pakistan has been at war with Afghanistan. The Saudis have done nothing. The Saudis are now being attacked by Iran. The Pakistanis are doing nothing. These paper agreements mean nothing. The actual strategic umbrella, who falls where, who gains what, is what counts, is what will give us accurate predictions. See, so if you look at Arab geopolitics, over the last 2 years, there was a huge fallout between the Saudis and the Emiratis. The Saudis felt that the Emiratis were playing a very seriously... UAE. They were playing but Qataris, Emiratis, Omanis, Saudis, these are basically the actual distinctions, not the state distinction. This is how they think, right? The role that the Emiratis have been playing in the Somalian situation, in the Sudanese genocide, in Egypt, in Ethiopia. I mean, we can do a separate podcast on that itself, where the UAE has been really, really playing a crazy destabilizing geopolitical role in the region. How do you think?
I thought that they were a peaceful country.
How do you think Dubai became the gold capital of the world?
The image given to us is that there was a visionary leader who planned decades ahead.
I completely agree. And part of that vision was almost all of that gold comes from Sudan. You keep funding the paramilitary force of the RSF in Sudan to attack civilians and commit as much genocide and keep this current conflict going. While their leader, the RSF's leader, is now a billionaire selling gold to the Emiratis, and Dubai is the gold capital of the world, and you have a major genocide in Sudan. So this is how commodities and wealth and power is always linked to conflict in some way, right? So anyway, the Saudis and the Emiratis were having a fallout, but now they have a common enemy again. Now they have the Iranians. So the point that I was trying to make earlier about the Sunnis and the Shias, would your audience know the difference, or should I just give a quick 1 minute? Okay, good. Now, as you know, that just comes down to one word, right? The Sunni-Shia difference, all it comes down to is the word Mawla, where when the Prophet Muhammad in his last pilgrimage basically said, Ali, the Lion of God, is my Mawla, and whoever considers me your Mawla should consider him your Mawla as well. The Sunnis basically say Mawla just means friend, whereas the Shia say no, it means follower, and then there's just that. So it's an existential problem that is built into the very history of Islam. This is not like Mahayana, Theravada, Shaivism, Vaishnavitism, Catholic, Protestant. This is not one of those subdivisions which happen after the religion has a period of flourishing. The Sunni Shia split happens in the lifetime of the Prophet, on his deathbed. So it's a religious rivalry that's a part of Islamic history from the very beginning. It's not like all these other interreligious divisions and all that which come centuries, in the case of Hinduism, millennia later, right? So that becomes very, very difficult to sort through, because in some generations it might play a big role.
It's woven into their fabric fundamentally.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a big deal, sometimes it's not a big deal. So if you go back 100 years, it might not have been a very big deal, because back then the major empires were like the Ottoman Empire in the Muslim world. So it wouldn't have been such a big deal. Whereas in today's world order, where you clearly have the Sunnis and the Shias on different ends of the geopolitical spectrum, that then becomes a major thing. So the irony is that if you remember when the Israelis hit the Iraqi nuclear program, Operation Babylon, to prevent Iraq from being a
When
nuclear...
was this?
1980, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure any people can Google that. It was when the Israelis were worried about Iran nuclearizing, the first time. Iraq nuclearizing, right, under Saddam Hussein. The Iranians were the ones who gave the Israelis the intelligence and the air corridor to fly into Iraq. And today, it's the opposite, where it's the Iraqis who are helping the Israelis fly into Iranian territory to bomb their kind of missile infrastructure.
So the
right?
Iraq airspace is allowed for the Israelis to fly through the jets?
So during the last 12-day war, whatever that you saw, that was how the Israeli planes flew through. An air corridor was provided. So it's in the 80s, it was the Persians giving the Jews intel about the Arabs. Today, it's the Arabs giving the Jews intel about the Persians.
That's politics for you.
That's politics. That's the kind of civilizational, ups and downs of conflict, which we should always be ready for, and we should take as a part of the game rather than being shocked about it.
So, what is the Iran's objective here?
Iran's objective is to survive, but they're not good.
But they're militarily not that strong, right? Technically not that strong, right?
Yeah. So let me give you Iran's basic strategy, right? Now, Iran has two major trump cards against the Arabs, which is that the Arab countries are heavily dependent on water desalination plants, because the desert societies, lack of fresh water and stuff like that. So if those plants are attacked with Iranian drones, that could bring Arab economies to a complete standstill. The second is their reliance on food imports. 90% of the food that's consumed by the Arab world comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So if the Iranians can squeeze that, then the Arabs have no food security either. So the Iranians need to drag this out into a war of attrition. You're not going to be able to win. They clearly know that, and they've known that for quite some time. Their goal is to pull this out as much as possible until Western kind of anti-missile capabilities and all that get degraded, and then they can start just swarming drones over and over and over again and collapse the Gulf economies with water scarcity and food scarcity. That's the main leverage that they have. And if Gulf money no longer goes into the American economy, the Iranian gamble is that the American economy will then tank. Look at AI, for example, right? Where would AI stock prices today be, which is kind of the whole Wall Street system that's built around AI at the moment? Where would all of that be if Gulf money is no longer available for you to pump into these stocks? It's going to be, what happens if without Gulf money, that turns into an AI bubble which bursts? The entire American economy is going to be shattered. So this is basically Iran's strategy, to pull it into a long war, to make sure that the Arabs are destabilized, and then hope that that destabilization will lead to a much bigger blow against the American economy, and the Americans and the Israelis have no choice but to kind of leave. But that will trigger a much bigger war, is my point.
Okay, before coming to that, in order for that to happen, Iran has to somehow get the drones and their missiles through the air defenses of Israel and US.
Yeah.
Given the technological difference between the two countries or the two parties, how can Iran actually manage to do this?
So the technological difference is essentially overcome by the cost imbalance. If you can shoot a drone at me that only costs $500 and the interceptor is $50,000, or if you shoot a drone at me that costs $50,000 and the interceptor for that ends up being $5 million, then at some point of time, even if I'm far richer than you, the basic economics there, your hope is will win out. And eventually that cost imbalance becomes too much of a burden to you.
So you're saying that Israel and America stepped into this war without knowing that?
So the Iranian hope is that that's what happens. See, the Iranians have already seen the Americans fumble once by coming into the region trying to take on the Houthis and then having to essentially take a back step because of not thinking out logistical problems like this. So the Iranians are very...
Yemen?
Yeah, Yemen. Yes. So if you remember, initially there was a big American push to try to get rid of the Houthis. And then the Americans figured it wasn't feasible. And then the Saudis kind of had to start playing a bigger... The Americans were like, hey, Saudis, you guys have to start doing something now. And the Saudis then had to start going in, which is where the whole Saudi Emirati, problems became even worse because the Saudis were accusing the Emiratis of helping the Houthis. So, I mean, my point is that Iran feels... And you can even see this if you look at what the Revolutionary Guard is putting out. See, both sides have put out their military objectives and their path to victory out very clearly. The Americans want either regime change, or if they can't do that, they want the entire Iranian navy and the entire Iranian missile program taken out, bombed. The Iranians...
Navy is gone, right?
They are, so there's a big bombing campaign going on at the moment. See, because... You need to, from an American and Israeli perspective, even from an Arab perspective, you need to ensure that Iran's navy cannot really affect trade in the Strait of Hormuz. You need to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz is kind of kept removed from whatever Iran's problems are for the regional interest, so to speak, right? So, the naval assets, missile assets, that will be the two big priorities for the Americans if regime change is not possible.
I have seen some news popping up that the iron beam technology, where the laser interceptors are currently in operation.
Yeah.
But is that a big enough of a... Does it have a big enough of a distribution to affect the outcome of the drones?
No, the iron beam will still take some time before you can make them a widespread technology throughout Israel. It will still take maybe by 2028 or something like that would be a more feasible scenario for it to be equipped all over. Once that happens, if they can export enough to the Gulf countries as well, then this whole drone dominance we've seen since the Ukraine war, that will then die out. We are currently in, how games have meta versions where each new patch keeps coming up.
Yeah.
In the current warfare meta, drones have a big, what do you call it? You don't call it a nerf, you call it a spike or whatever. So in the current patch of warfare, in the current meta, drones are the most popular, efficient weapons that you can use in a campaign like this.
So how many weapons does Iran have right now?
See, it was estimated before the war that in terms of short, medium and long range missiles, they have about 3,000.
But they must have been using it.
They've been using it, but
1,000 or so? More?
Yeah, but those are not the ones that are actually producing any damage. It's the much smaller, cheaper drones, like the one used against the Dubai airport, like the ones used against that luxury hotel. That psychological damage is what Iran has gained from this. Look, when you're losing 1,000 people and the other side has lost only 20 people, you can't really call that a victory mathematically. So the missiles itself are not what matter. It's the endless supply of drones that will constantly be creating a psychological fear. For when will our oil refineries get struck? When will our desalinization plants get struck? It's a constant threat to the critical infrastructure of the Arab states.
Okay, in that case, if Iran has... So most people say that the THAAD systems, the Patriots, or the Iron Domes cannot intercept hypersonic missiles. In that case, if Iran has at least 200 hypersonic missiles, I think Fatah 2 or something, why can't they fire at those desalination plants?
So, I mean, they could, but it's a lot easier to. From an American, Arab, Israeli point of view, where money is not a big problem, intercepting those missiles is actually a lot easier and more efficient, because at least then the interceptor missile that you're using, there's some kind of cost parity. See, even if they send in 300 proper of these major, bigger...
But they say that it cannot be intercepted because it's too fast.
No, I mean, so there's currently nothing that Iran can use which cannot be intercepted at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can't really. So it will be now, if you bombard and break that limit, then you can, of course,
you just
get
overwhelm
through.
the defenses.
Yeah, if you can just overwhelm them with numbers, then you can. But there's no such thing as a missile that cannot be intercepted and all that.
But I heard that I've been watching this Indian analysts on podcast, couple of them actually, they on different podcasts. So what they were saying that,
so who are the good ones that you like?
I couldn't remember the names.
Okay.
Both of them were in their 60s or 70s, I guess.
Okay. So two retired generals probably.
Maybe.
Okay.
So they were talking about hypersonic, not the ballistic ones, the cruise missiles, which can change direction and avoid interception. In that case, what happens?
Yeah, see, so now that itself should tell you that they've not really made a distinction. Now, all ballistic missiles are hypersonic missiles. Because all...
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
So now, and with cruise missiles, now even if it is hypersonic, right? Number one, what is the trajectory going to be? Are you going to fly so low that it avoids the radar? Or are you going to fly so high that it does get picked up and it gets intercepted? If you fly too low, your accuracy goes down. So if it was a case of just magically pressing a hypersonic missile and blasting it, then the Americans would be winning every single war, right? The Americans with their hypersonic missile stockpile could just be pressing weapons. Why is it that they need the fighter jets to come in? Why is it that they need human intelligence? Why is it that they resort to these asymmetric capabilities as well? Because no weapons platform is as invincible as we think it is, which is just a victory trump card the way we think it is. It doesn't work that way. No.
Okay. On the other hand, I saw a few news items on that as well, where Chinese has supplied air defenses to Iran and that they didn't work.
Yeah, how'd that work out for them? See, the thing is, okay, if you remember, we've had many conversations about weaponry, tech and all that. And we've often spoken about, the 6th generation Chinese fighter pilot versus the 6th generation American fighter pilot. And what have I always said in those conversations? The technology does not matter. Performance does. The F-35 has now been used in multiple military operations. There was a 2021 or 22 Israeli F-35 that went through Russian air defenses in Iran to take out many of these ballistic missile things. In the Venezuela operation, F-35s were used for support. With American technology, you can actually point to real life examples where these weapons have worked. Whereas Chinese weapons look fantastic on a parade, they sound great on a press release, but where are the actual success stories of Chinese high-tech weapons?
Did China actually supplied weapons, air defenses to Iran?
Yeah, China and Russia supplied air defenses to Iran, Venezuela, a number of these kind of,
Even
alternative...
Russian ones failed.
Yeah, even the Russian ones failed. I mean, look, in general, this is a major criticism that many people in the weapons industry have against Russia and China. That their weapons, unfortunately, are kind of shit. For me, pardon my French. But it's also true. Where Western weaponry, particularly American weaponry, simply has a verifiable track record that Chinese weaponry does not. So, how good are these Chinese weapons and all that? Yeah, I mean, they look great on a parade. But when you start using them in an actual war, that's when you win the real analysts over. Like what the F-35 has done, for instance.
Okay. So China yesterday issued a bulletin or a news
Yes.
that they are supporting Iran and
Yes.
asking America to stop the hostilities. So now people are expecting that they would support Iran militarily. What is your take on that?
0% chance of anything like that happening. No chance whatsoever. What Venezuela, Syria, and now Iran will prove is that for all this talk of the American empire dying and BRICS and all that, for all this rise of China stuff, the Americans can come into anybody's backyard and do what they want, and you've just got to shut the hell up. But if anything happens in their backyard, you have no power to intervene. They can pull off Venezuela in their backyard, and Russia and China just have to sit back and watch. They can go pull something off like an Iran in someone else's backyard, or a Syria, and Russia and China just have to sit back and watch. But if Russia has a problem with Ukraine, or China has a problem with Taiwan, you can bet your last dollar that the Western alliance will be in a position to affect that. Like what we see with Russia, Ukraine at the moment, where the Ukraine's entire resistance so far has been based on the Western alliance supporting Ukraine at kind of almost an irrational cost, but supporting them nonetheless. So what this proves is American military dominance is still alive and kicking, and all the naysayers, they can say whatever they want, but actions speak louder than words.
So if China is never going to enter the conflict in a militarized manner,
Yeah.
so you said that the next thing could be the World War III. How could that happen if the China is not in there?
Because if the United States and Israel start losing, then China gets more brash about Taiwan, other countries start getting more brash about each other. If this ends in the US economy tanking, there are lots of old scores that many people have against, from Thailand, Cambodia, to Ethiopia, Eritrea, to Brazil and Argentina, to all kinds of countries all over the world. There are lots of unsettled civilizational scores that will come to the foreground if you don't have a stable global environment and someone to kind of intervene. So
whether we like it or not, having US as the stable giant or a superpower is beneficial to the world.
So for those who study the world strategically, it's a good thing. For those who insist that the world has to be studied through a moral lens, it's a bad thing, right? So for instance, when I hear that the United States has intervened in Venezuela and picked up Maduro, my approach is to say, okay, how did they do it? What are the reasons? What were the means and methods used? What are the possible consequences? That's how I look at it. Someone else would read the same piece of news and their reaction would be, oh my God, how can you do this? How can you kidnap a president of another country? This is not fair. This is unjust, blah, blah, blah. So, when you see a lion killing a deer, my approach would be to say, the lion has sharp teeth and it's going for the deer's neck and it's now killing the deer, blah, blah, blah. Whereas another person's approach would be, oh my God, the poor deer, oh, look at the evil lion eating the deer, right? So there's a clear difference. If you're somebody who studies the world clinically, strategically, you can see how having a major military power keeps the peace. But if you're someone who's all about justice and fairness and smaller countries should also get the same treatment as weaker countries and all that, then you're obviously going to be against the United States and you're obviously going to be against the system, because in any system, the strong get what they want and the weak have to shut up and tolerate it.
Don't we need balance in the world?
See, now once again, you say need, but the whole point is that that's not how the world functions. Maybe Christmas needs Santa
That's
Claus.
wishful thinking.
Yeah, but that doesn't make Santa Claus real. Maybe the world needs international law, but that doesn't mean international law is real. When has any powerful country ever been penalized by international law for bullying a weaker country? When has a nuclear power ever been made to face any meaningful legal punishment for attacking a weaker state? The answer is never. But some people still insist on living in this delusion, and every day they wake up going, oh my God, how can this happen? Trump is ending the world. Do you guys have no respect for international law? What international law? What are you telling me that if George Bush had done the same thing, the International Criminal Court would have stepped in? Are you telling me that if Stalin had done the same thing, some international tribunal would have stepped in? That's
Unless
crazy.
they lost the war.
Sorry?
Unless they lost the war.
Yeah, unless you lose a war, in which case you don't belong to the strong anymore. So my point is that the strong do what they want and the weak have to suffer what they must, as the saying goes, right? So if you're someone who's willing to study the world in that clinical, critical, analytical way, then you wouldn't really have any problem with the American hegemonic system, but otherwise you will.
So Iranians ideally at this point would want to inflict maximum damage to US and Israelis, to their bases, to their plants, to their factories.
Through a long-term campaign. They can't do it short-term. They have to do it through a long-term campaign. That's what they're hoping for.
So you said that they are resilient.
Yes.
Are they resilient enough to do that long term?
That's the question. The Americans feel that they are not. The Iranians feel that they are. So it's going to come down to this very basic question. The Iranians say, we've been preparing for this for many, many decades now. We are far more resilient than you think. The Americans say, look, that's theoretical resilience. But when bombs are actually dropping on your head, let's see how well all this theory holds up.
What about the other Gulf countries getting together and attacking Iran together with the Americans? And
So
Israelis?
that might happen pretty soon if Iran continues with this. Look,
In that case, Iran has a very big disadvantage.
yeah, but even then, unless you're prepared to bomb the whole of Iran into the Stone Age, you're not going to be able to stop all the underground bunkers in which these small cheap drones are being built.
They have been built as we speak.
Being built as we speak because they've been a huge supplier of drones to Russia to be used in the Russia-Ukraine war.
So they had a surplus.
They had a huge surplus. They've had a big ecosystem that's been built over the last 5 to 6 years. Like
so
how
all
Ukraine...
indigenously sourced?
Yes. So just like how Ukraine has a big indigenous drone ecosystem over the last 3 or 4 years because of the war, Iran also now has a proper indigenous...
Hold on.
Yeah.
So all these drones, at least they have to have some sort of electronic brain there.
Yeah.
So in that case, all these chips are all manufactured in Iran, you mean?
No, the chips are basically taken from other civilian items. They're kind of reverse engineered with some Chinese components coming in. So to my knowledge, the only external player in the supply chain is China. But other than that, all of that is being done by Iran without really any support from anyone else. I think what they also do is they take commercial drones and they found unique contraptions that you can put on these commercial drones in order to drop the payload, and do things like that. So they've been very inventive with adapting commercial drones.
So what about the explosives? Do they have any minerals in the country to manufacture?
Yeah, but that's very easy to get. I mean, you can even get that in Sri Lanka, to be honest. Just making homemade, just getting explosive material, getting volatile material that will ignite with heat or impact, that's not very difficult to find.
Okay. So in that case, we would expect a war of attrition. In that case, it is bad for smaller countries like us. So there should be strategies for us to follow in order to minimize the impact.
Yeah.
So since we are a small country near a big country, India, what would be our strategy here?
See, now, the major vulnerability we have on the surface is our energy vulnerability, right? Because as you can see from queues outside petrol stations and all that, why does it happen? Even when the government tells people not to panic. It happens because everybody knows that we are an energy insufficient country. We are not a country that can meet our own energy requirements if oil prices go up. Everybody knows this. So everybody wants to stockpile. So it ends up with panic buying. And then the black market eventually inevitably comes in. Then you need to tell the cops to come in and it turns into a law and order problem. Right? A basic acknowledgement of our poverty, which is we can't afford to buy our own energy, that leads into a law and order problem when oil prices go up. So now there are two things that we need to do. First, we need to become a part of an energy grid. See, the
That means we have to link up with India.
something. So, for example, I mean, so we'll come to which country as well, right? So, because as you know, with my accent and all that, if I immediately go into India, then the assumptions are quite.
You are a
know.
Sri Lankan.
Yeah, I'm a Sri Lankan. I'm from Jaffna. So, but it's just that most people here just equate a Jaffna accent with an Indian accent. So there's nothing you can do about it, right? So anyway, what we can do is look at connecting ourselves into an energy grid. So, for example, Ireland is part of the UK's energy grid. Portugal is part of the whatever the larger Iberian energy grid. Denmark is part of the Nordic energy grid. Nepal is part of India's energy grid.
When you say energy grid, it's not the electricity energy grid,
No,
right?
by energy grid, what I mean is a formalized energy partnership where you either have electricity interconnectivity, or you have a renewable energy agreement, or you have some kind of framework to transport oil barrels on a regular basis. What we mean by grid is framework. You are part of a formalized.
Don't we have such already?
No, we don't have like a proper. Well, whose energy?
So it's
grid?
ad hoc, you mean?
Yeah, it's
we
very
have.
ad hoc. Everything that we do has been ad hoc. As I said, the whims of whoever's in power. So each new political party comes, we celebrate that the country is now going to change, and we reserve the same lines for the next political party.
The
that comes in.
repercussions for the short-sightedness we had for the 75 years.
I mean, this is the result of electoral politics without ideology, unfortunately. The result of electoral politics without a common ideology for Sri Lankan interests. Where traditionally, if the SLFP came to power, we aligned with the Chinese and the Russians. If the UNP comes to power, we align with the Americans. And we don't really care what happens when we go out of power, where foreign policy changes again. So this is the result of all that. But my point is, a small country being a part of a larger country's energy grid is a very commonplace thing. Like all the examples I just gave you, or Estonia and Latvia plugged into the Belarus energy grid, right? But the question is, do we as a society have the maturity and the courage to confront the uncomfortable questions that will inevitably come? Which is, so who should our energy partner be? Whose energy grid are we going to be a part of? Who is going to be our formalized energy partner?
With India nearby, they don't want us to go for anyone else.
So geographically, economically, India would make the most sense. But you already know what would happen if political parties here try to push this agenda, and what accusations even you and I will be subject to if we advocate that in this podcast. The same thing happens to the pro-China guys as well. The same thing happens to the pro-US China.
So we are too democratic.
We are too democratic, where our foreign policy and strategic discourse moves more along the lines of whose secret agenda is this guy serving, rather than let me think about what this person's saying in an objective, sober way. So that's the problem. You know that you could sit here and you could say America should be our primary energy partner. You know what the comments will be. You could say China, you know what your audience is obviously a lot more refined and intelligent, and I'm kind of sucking up to the audience at the moment. But yes, our listeners are obviously brilliant. But just the...
But you find here and there some.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
course,
nothing's
there,
perfect, right? Yeah, so you do find some intoxicants here and there. But the point is that we don't even have the maturity as a society to have that strategic conversation, which is the bigger worry.
I think now it's time for that.
It's certainly time for that. It's certainly time for people to start pushing these things forward without regard to how their personal reputations might be affected. But not many people will be willing to take that plunge.
And even more so, the media itself, however they are creating news, it's not going to be a good just cause for this. They will definitely, mess it up.
Yeah. So it's actually up to guys like you, people who have alternate platforms, people who have a far more direct line of communication to a younger demographic, people who have a far more direct line of communication to the policymakers of the future. It's up to you guys to change this mentality. Because the mentality of I can give you horror stories that I won't go into on camera of training, future diplomats who've just joined the foreign service and all that, and how ill prepared they are to deal with Sri Lankan strategic choices. It's not their fault. It's just that the
You
system...
don't have that culture.
The culture, the system is not built for people who want to ask critical questions, for people who want to think on a deeper level, for people who want to suggest alternative scenarios. The system is not built for people like that. The system is built very much for groupthink and emotional intelligence. Can I make my superior happy or not? So we need to change that.
Okay, last question. World War III.
Yes.
So you said if America and Israel gets weakened
Yes.
economically and they cannot sustain this war, there could be a chance that the World War III is happening.
Definitely.
In that case, what will be the factions and what would be the outcome?
So the factions will be split alongside dollars versus non-dollars. So
You're not going to say yuan.
no. See, even the Chinese don't want the yuan to be a global currency. They've said that very clearly.
But weren't they applying for it to be a reserve currency?
No. What they want is for that to be used in these transactions that they have with smaller countries, loan repayments and all that, where instead of dollars, you can pay in our currency. Look, the thing is, if you want to be a global reserve currency, you have to run a trade deficit. You can't be a global reserve currency and also have a trade surplus. You have to be deeply in debt. This is what happened to the Portuguese in the 1400s and 1500s when they became the first global currency. This is what happened to the Dutch in the 1800s where the Bank of Netherlands became the first ever reserve bank of the world. This is what happened to the British sterling pound. And this is what is happening currently with the US dollar.
And even Japan.
No, but Japan was never a global... See, the thing is, when you're a global reserve currency, that means everybody should have reserves of your currency. And for you to do that, you need to give them, you need to buy their products and give them your currency for them to have US dollars in their pockets. If not, you can't be a reserve currency. You can only be a reserve currency if people have reserves of your currency. So for that, you have to buy a lot more than you sell. Because I need to buy your phone and give you Nilanthan rupees. Because I want Nilanthan rupees to circulate. So China has made it very clear they are not interested in running a deficit.
So you print money and buy out.
Yeah, you print money, you buy products, right? And you just...
So how do you tackle the inflation?
You don't have to tackle the inflation because you're the most powerful nation in the world. See, you can the Americans can print money indefinitely as long as they remain the most powerful military faction in the world, which is where the confidence of the dollar comes from. So you can just print money as much as you want, as long as people believe in American power, the dollar will still do. Even today, if you and I had the chance to own US dollars or Chinese yuan, we would pick US dollars. You can go to any country in the world and ask a regular person operating in a fish market or whatever, what currency would you secretly love to own? The answer would be US dollars. Everybody around the world wants to hold US dollars. That's because there's a certain level of faith that they have in the American system.
So how does faith correlate to the actual inflation of printing the money?
The inflation doesn't affect you. You can just ignore the inflation. You just ignore the consequence.
So they just control by force.
No, you don't control the exchange rate. You make sure that all of this is coming back into your economy. So it creates almost like a bubble. So I send you money, you have that money, but you're using it to buy stuff. My money is being circulated, and that gives me an extra dollar here. See, nobody knows how many dollars are actually in circulation around the world.
Yes, they don't.
Right? Because you
That's
have
a big
$10,
secret, right?
you
They're
can
keeping
give it to
that
me.
secret.
Yeah, and it's come to a point now where you can't even track it. Even the Americans can't track it anymore. So this is why they're introducing things like stable coin. And I don't know whether you guys have heard of the Genius Act and stable coin and the threat that this is posing to crypto. You know, there's the other thing, maybe we can discuss it in another episode, is
I will get a perfect guy to discuss it with me.
Okay. Is the war between, just like how there's an energy war, there's a currency war going on between the dollar, gold, and crypto. As in, some people say that the future of currency is going to be digital, is going to be crypto. Some people feel that the dollar will continue to be the most dominant currency even 50 years into the future. Some people say, no, invest in gold. It's a safe haven asset. Forget about the dollar. Forget about fiat currency. Just hold gold. And then there are other people who are like, there's going to be a BRICS currency and all that, which is not going to happen for a while, right? See, why would China link up its currency with a volatile economy like South Africa? Why would Russia link up its currency with a country like Brazil, which is at the doorstep of the United States? Why would India sign on board to a currency where the major fiscal decisions were
Then
being
why
taken
create
in
the
Beijing?
alliance in the first place?
Yeah, so it's look, the BRICS alliance is a very symbolic alliance. The major countries understand this. Unfortunately, foreign policy analysts and IR experts and the people studying this don't. Whether even in Sri Lanka, if you look at the general,
It's a good thing that we didn't participate in the
yeah, good.
in the whatever that
No,
gathering.
see, the thing is, participating in BRICS is not the problem. The point is that BRICS is not what a lot of these people think it is. It's never going to be an alternative to the dollar. It's never going to be an alternative to the American kind of geopolitical system. There are too many fractions even within BRICS, like India and China, for example. This is all a symbolic power play to show that the unipolar world dominated by the Americans now has competition. That's all it is. But other than that, do they have a defense treaty with each other like NATO does? No. Is there a free trade agreement like NAFTA or whatever? No. Do they have a common currency like the euro? No. Do they have any kind of, institutional big building like the UN where these guys have permanent representatives? No. I've just given you the UN as an example, the Euro as an example, NAFTA as an example, NATO as an example. From 4 different domains, what we would consider to be a regional entity. BRICS doesn't have any of that. So, yeah.
It's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue, to be honest.
Okay. All right. So we were talking about the World War III. What would be the factions?
So the factions would be the countries that operate in the dollar versus the countries that want to break away from the dollar. See, the World War III will break out. World War III will break out when countries start trying to break away from the dollar system. And that will happen when American military supremacy keeps going down. See, the Americans have over 1,000 military installations all over the world. They have hundreds of military bases built all over the world. Why do they have these bases? It's to protect the dollar. So if anybody thinks that the Americans are just going to sit back and do nothing while some BRICS currency or yuan or gold or Bitcoin or something just comes and take over, if they think this entire system built around the world to protect the dollar is just going to sit back and watch and do nothing, they are very, very mistaken. That's how World War III starts.
Will the nuclear weapons will be used there?
I think nuclear weapons, if it comes to an existential point, will be used. It's a long way away if it happens, but I wouldn't really count out that possibility.
Does Iran have nuclear weapons?
No, right now Iran does not have nuclear weapons.
What about the earthquake that just happened today, 2 hours ago?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously we can, wait for a little longer and see. The problem with many of these...
Can the Chinese supply them?
No.
They won't go that far.
They won't go that far. And once again, look, the Chinese don't have that much to gain from doing this. Of course, Iran is a major oil importer and China is very, very dependent on oil. There's no denying that. But, if you look up the Ben Ghoreib Canal or something which Israel is now building, which is going to bypass the Suez Canal, China will be the biggest benefactor of that. And in fact, many Chinese experts say that China has a secret wink relationship with the Israelis as well, where they're like, yeah, we'll always, voice out against you. But when has China ever physically acted against Israel's interests? Even the last UN vote, China abstained rather than voting against Israel.
So these are little details that most people miss.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. So I think we covered most of it.
Yep.
And if there are any questions, the audience can comment out. And if there are any alternative theories, you are welcome to voice it out. And thank you, Nilanthan, for that insightful discussion.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope that the war won't last much longer and maybe over in about a couple of weeks. All right. Take care, guys.